They came to conquer us. They came with weapons, fire, and chains. But one human refused to answer violence with hate, and instead offered a hand. What began as an act of mercy became the spark that ended a 1,000-year war. Before we dive into this story, a quick moment. If you're enjoying these powerful journeys of humanity among the stars, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel. Now let's step into the stars. The war had already burned for centuries before humanity was even noticed. The Kelrath Empire, giant reptilian beings who had dominated hundreds of systems, had been locked in a cycle of blood with the insectoid Valar. To them, war was not just politics or survival, it was existence. Generations were born into conflict, fought, and died without ever knowing a world without fire. When humanity finally took to the stars, our arrival was less than a footnote in their endless war. We were primitive to them, young, fragile, barely out of our cradle. To the Kelrath, we were potential laborers. To the Valar, we were irrelevant prey. But what they both failed to understand was this. Humanity had something neither side remembered: compassion, the ability to see beyond the cycle of vengeance. The story begins on the shattered moon of Vale Prime. It was a battlefield turned graveyard, air thick with ash and the carcasses of ships that had once shone like silver. Amid the wreckage, a human salvage vessel, small, underarmed, forgotten, dared to land. Its captain was Elias Ward, a man not remarkable by the standards of the great powers, not a general, not a politician, not a scientist of renown. He was simply a former medic turned salvager. He had a crew of 12, each one a misfit of the expanding human frontier. They were not soldiers. They were survivors. When they landed, they expected ruins. What they found was a dying Kelrath warrior. The alien was massive, scaled hide torn by plasma burns, chest heaving raggedly. He should have been their enemy. He should have been the monster who would have slaughtered them had he the strength. Every instinct said to finish him, to walk away, to let the galaxy's predators consume each other. But Elias knelt beside the Kelrath and began to work. The crew thought him mad. They protested. Why waste medicine on an enemy? Why risk the wrath of a species that saw them as nothing? But Elias only said, because he's dying, and because if we let him die, we become the very thing we claim to resist. Hours later, the Kelrath lived. His name was Rask. He was a war leader, disgraced, left behind when his battalion had retreated. And now he owed his life to a human. The Kelrath had no word for gratitude. Their culture saw mercy as weakness. But when Rask tried to rise, when his wounded body collapsed and Elias caught him, something changed. For the first time in his long, violent life, Rask saw power not in the edge of a blade, but in an open hand. Elias could have turned him over to the Valar, could have ransomed him to the Kelrath, but he did neither. He brought Rask aboard the salvage ship. He fed him. He healed him. He treated him not as a beast, not as an enemy, but as family. The galaxy would never be the same. Word spread, first as whispers, then as rumors. A Kelrath war leader traveling with humans, eating with them, laughing with them, defending them. Madness, heresy. But it was true. When Valar raiders ambushed the salvage crew, it was Rask who stood at the airlock with a human-made rifle, bellowing in defiance, cutting down those who came for his rescuers. And when the crew later asked why, he answered in halting human speech, "Because you are mine, not slaves, not prey, family." The Kelrath hunted him for this betrayal. The Valar sought his head for vengeance. But wherever Elias's ship traveled, others noticed. Exiles, runaways, slaves freed in border skirmishes, aliens who had only ever known the cycle of conquest and revenge, they came to see the human who had turned a Kelrath into a brother. The crew grew. What had been 12 became 50. 50 became hundreds. And among them were children. Kelrath orphans, Valar younglings, species scattered and forgotten. Elias taught them all the same lesson. You do not need to be enemies. You do not need to be what your ancestors were. You can choose. The galaxy laughed at first. They called them fools, dreamers, trespassers against the natural order. But then the impossible began. A Kelrath commander, sworn to kill Rask, confronted him on the desert world of Sarun. Thousands watched as Rask raised his weapon, only to throw it down. And Elias stepped forward, placing his hand on the commander's chest, saying words broadcast across the stars. War is easy. Family is harder, but it is stronger. Something broke that day. The commander did not fire. Others followed. Soldiers began to defect, not to power or promises of wealth, but to the simple, bewildering strength of compassion. The Valar, too, saw their young stolen by this strange idea. An insectoid hatchling, orphaned in battle, clung to Elias's sleeve and called him father. To the Valar, it was an abomination. To Elias, it was hope. And so, warlords began to fear. Not the weapons of humanity. Our fleets were still small, our armies thin, but the infection of our ideals. Elias had never meant to start a movement, but now he was its heart. He stood before battle lines and refused to fight. He walked into enemy camps unarmed, carrying food and medicine and left with defectors. His message spread faster than any fleet. You don't have to hate. You can choose love. You can choose family. The Kelrath High Council put a price on his head. The Valar broodmothers called him a virus. Assassins came. Saboteurs struck. But each time, it was not humans alone who saved him. It was Kelrath warriors who once swore to kill him. It was Valar whose mandibles once dripped with human blood. Enemies became shields, foes became brothers, and then came the day of the burning armada. The Kelrath and Valar, desperate to end the infection of peace, united fleets for the first time in history. 1,000 ships descended upon Elias's refuge, the hidden moon they had named Haven. Against them stood nothing but a patchwork fleet of defectors, deserters, and dreamers, a fraction of their strength. The Council expected an easy slaughter, but when their ships entered orbit, they found their own soldiers refusing to fire. Entire squadrons powered down, crews laid down arms, voices rang across comm channels, echoing a phrase that began with one human, one act of mercy, and had now become a movement. We are not enemies, we are family. The armada fractured, chaos spread, and in that chaos, the war collapsed. Centuries of blood ended not with a final battle, not with a new weapon, but with the simple refusal of thousands to keep killing each other. At the heart of it, standing on the bridge of a salvager's ship, was Elias. Not a general, not a conqueror, just a human who had chosen compassion. The Kelrath who once would have devoured his bones now called him brother. The Valar who once would have drained his blood now carried his banner. He had turned enemies into family. And that, my friends, is the story of how one human reshaped a galaxy, not with fleets or weapons, but with the courage to care. If this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe for more journeys into humanity's place among the stars, and don't forget to drop your city's name in the comments. I love seeing where you're watching from, because in the end, whether you're in New York, Karachi, Sydney, or anywhere in between, these stories remind us we, too, are family.